Hi, everybody. My name is Diane Borman. I'm a multi award winning business growth specialist. What do I do? This is always interesting. People ask me. I'm not a coach, I'm not a mentor, and I'm not a consultant. I'm a business growth expert. That means that I'm here to help you increase your sales, increase your profit, and increase your confidence. All while we add practical business knowledge so that you can make better business decisions. As you grow, and that's who I work with, is business owners that want to grow to the next level. And as we grow to that next level, we need new knowledge. We need wisdom sometimes. We can't just be doing the same old, trying to get to that next level. The problem that I solve is practical knowledge. My experience comes from owning my own businesses, selling them, building a franchise levels, business, etc. And so that information I share. And I've been working with hundreds of business owners now, doing what I've been doing over the last number of years. And we give you access to an ecosystem which often we don't have. So experts surround me in certain areas, from legal, from numbers, from all sorts of areas, and I will teach you how to build your experts around you. We also help you with the building of strategies and plans, and of course the implementation behind that. But also we hold you accountable for what your goals are and for what you want to achieve. Sometimes business owners and entrepreneurs find being in business extremely lonely. Sometimes it's scary. And most of the times, they don't have enough practical knowledge because they haven't done that jump to the next level yet. So we help you because what we stand for, what I stand for, is gaining and sharing knowledge and wisdom for innovation and pushing your boundaries, most certainly, and your limits. You didn't realize that you can get to that next level in many instances. We move businesses from 6 or 7 figures to 8 figure businesses. I want to share my voice in a public speaking scenario, but I'm also there to facilitate in different workshops and one on one where we work through the diamond plan. You most certainly will have a lot of fun. We will laugh lots. I have a very infectious laugh, and if you're feeling stressed, that laugh is going to get to you, guaranteed. But I'm also going to share my experience. I'm here to inspire, motivate, and educate business owners for growth so that you can increase your sales, your profit, and your confidence. What I won't stand for is inauthenticity, because we will discover that along the way, stagnation in business, and just simply boringness. We don't want to be boring ever. We need that level of innovation, that level of creativity. So I'm here to help you build an ecosystem. I want you to take the time to be supported by business owners. And I want this ecosystem to be working together, adding positivity to one another, whilst employing and making impact in the economy.
So everybody knows I try and start exactly at 12 because we're all really, really busy. So we've got an hour, 60 minutes. So welcome everybody. You know that there will be a lot of people. Well, there's normally a lot more people that jump on because everybody is a little bit later in their lives. Even though we're not driving around and having to sickle with traffic or everything, we still have the last minute people arriving. So they will be coming, so don't let it distract you. And we are super excited to introduce Nick to us today. I'm not going to introduce Nick, although I don't know whether Nick knows that I met him about 3 or 4 years ago when he was interviewing the CEO of Yoko. And it was quite a fascinating interview that you did. So Nick and I are in a group together doing something else, which is quite an interesting space that we're busy playing in there. And I've asked Nick to come and talk because we get into a space of startups and then we move on and then we get involved in our business, and you're supposed to be working on your business. So when are you supposed to go back to the startup mindset and those kind of things? And those issues are definitely happening right now. So Nick, welcome and thank you so much for your time. It's over to you.
Brilliant. Thanks for having me. Hi, everybody. I am very happy. If you would like to interrupt me in the chat, please go ahead. I'll hit your disagreements or questions or concerns as we go or at the end. I'm sure we're going to do a Q&A, but let's get started. So I do suggest that you focus on my window if that's possible, and just make sure that everybody has got me big so you can see me. So I've dedicated my life to building startups. I built my first startup when I was 16. It dramatically failed. My second one at 18, then at 20, 21, and I failed 10 years back to back to back. So I count myself as quite an expert in failure and learning and lessons. And on top of building my own startups and side hustles, I've also engaged with some of the most incredible entrepreneurs that our world knows. I have a podcast that I've interviewed the founder of Starbucks, who is a mentor of mine, the founder of Electronic Arts, and all kinds of incredible businesses. And I've learned some very specific things about startups that it's important that we all try and remember. And today I'm going to help you see what I see in the world of business and startups. And I'm going to give you some very key takeaways that hopefully will spark some change and thinking in your minds about your businesses and your teams. So the first thing I want you to know is that pressure is a privilege. I heard someone say this yesterday, and it absolutely blew my brain. I've never thought of being under pressure in this way. And I mean, can you think of a more pressurizing startup founder than Mark Zuckerberg standing in front of Congress and just really being useless? The thing that I love about Mark Zuckerberg is that he is 2 days older than I am. And that hurts me deep, deep down, because one of my first startups when I was about 20 was a social network before Facebook became big. And let me tell you, you can't build a global social network from South Africa. It's just not possible. So I want you to think that pressure is a privilege, because that's how startups exist. They put themselves in a position of pressure. They want to be there. They're solving big problems that should be changing the world. And big businesses often feel like pressure is a pain, not a privilege. And startups understand fundamentally that pressure is a good thing. I'm going to steal from a word that Diane gave me in one of our calls recently, but pressure is the thing that changes coal to diamonds. And startups fundamentally understand this. Diane, I promise you I won't use that forever. So what I want to do now is I want to take you back to the year 2000 into Blockbuster's boardroom. I can only imagine that this is what it looked like, right? That's how outdated we think Blockbuster was back then. They had an overhead projector. And in this meeting, in their boardroom in the year 2000, Netflix came to see them. This is an actual story. The Netflix CEO and his team came to talk to Blockbuster and their team about cooperating together. They wanted Blockbuster to promote Netflix and Netflix to promote Blockbuster. Now, we all know how this ended. Netflix was literally laughed out of the room, because at that time, Blockbuster had a complete monopoly on all of their customers' attention. If you wanted to rent a DVD, you went to a Blockbuster. Netflix was trying to break into this market, and Blockbuster didn't understand one fundamental thing. They were profiting off punishing their customers. And we all know this feeling, right? If you're sitting in this room and you're even close to my age, you will remember that panic on a Sunday evening at 8 p.m. when you rented a DVD on Saturday night and you had to rush to get it back before you had to pay double to get that DVD for another night because you forgot to bring it back. Blockbuster was profiting off their customers' pain, and they didn't understand this. Fundamentally, they missed this. Their perspective was broken in spite of it being presented to them. I imagine that the very next day, this is what it was like. There was their CEO standing in front of a burning building, telling people nothing to see here, move along, everything's fine, let's just ignore the Netflix people. And then they started to panic because things started to unravel quickly, and Blockbuster went under, and we all know that they did. And the thing that I'm trying to get you to understand today is that there is no need for panic. Like one of my favorite books of all time, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, will tell you, when you open the book and the galaxy is in front of you, the first thing you need to do is not panic. And startups are really good at not panicking. Startups are really good at understanding that the world we have is the world we were always going to have. We were always going to have video conferencing. We were just going to have it slower than Corona has presented to us. We were always going to have artificial intelligence. We were always going to have disruptive and innovative businesses, and startups are always going to form part of this. So my job today is to help you shift your perspective. I want you to shift your perspective so that your perspective can begin to shift your business. And to do that, you have to understand that the world we're in was always going to be the world we were going to get. And right now, the world that we find ourselves in is in a recession and is in a depression and is rapidly changing. And there are companies coming to eat your lunch. And in my experience, those companies are mostly startups. How do I know that this is true? I want to shift your perspective to understand that this is true because startups have done it in the past. There have been businesses that were built inside of recessions and depressions that have gone on to shape the way that we understand the world we're in today. And here are a few of them. General Electric was a startup in the year 1892 in the midst of a depression. Disney launched in 1929. Electronic Arts, who we'll talk about just now, they were launched in 1982. WhatsApp launched in 2009, Airbnb in 2008, and Slack in 2009. These companies have gone on to change the way we understand the world, and they did it in the midst of a recession or depression. They didn't shy away from things that the rest of the world thought was bad. They leaned in towards them. This is a quote from the CEO of Slack. In an increasingly dynamic world, the fundamental business advantage is organizational agility. And that's actually what we're talking about today. I'm really sorry. My camera seems to be going in and out of focus. You'll just have to deal with me on that one. It's new technology. That's just, hopefully it'll come back in shortly. So this is what we're actually talking about, right? We're talking about organizational agility. We're talking about our company and staff's ability to react and respond to the things that are presented to them. So what I'm going to do going forward is give you 5 or 6 ways that you can start acting and thinking like a startup. These are things that I know fundamentally startups do that you should start stealing from them. The very first one I want to talk about is one of my favorite companies run by one of my favorite people. This is a company called Brick, B-R-C-K. It's run by a guy called Eric Hersman and many, many other people, but Eric is the CEO and he's a friend of mine. And I interviewed him on my podcast and I was asking him about Brick and why it exists. And if you don't know, Brick is a company that provides internet to the emerging markets in very hard to reach places. And they build this modem, the Brick modem, in East Africa, in Kenya, for that market. And their statement is, why should East Africans be using technology built in first world countries or developed markets when those markets don't understand anything about how robust and difficult it is to get internet in more rural areas? So that was the first constraint that Brick brought about. They understood that the things that they needed to use needed to be more robust and more sturdy than they already had. The thing that I love about the founding story is Eric is so smart in the way he approaches the world that he applies constraints to his own thinking as well as his own business. So he had finished a meeting in Cape Town with another friend of mine, and he got on a plane and he decided there and then to not do anything on the plane. He put a constraint on his distraction. He decided to not watch TV, to not read a book, to not play on his phone, to do nothing. He wanted to be bored for the 6-hour flight he was about to take. And he wanted to see what that constraint would do to his thinking. And what it did was clarify the meeting he just had into the product that he then launched called Brick. And I absolutely love the idea of letting your brain have the constraint of no distractions, freeing it from being involved in something else. And that is how Brick was built, out of the constraint of boredom and the emerging markets being different to a developed market. The next business I want to talk about is Tesla. The constraint that Elon Musk put on, this is ad spend per vehicle sold. And the shocker is Tesla is now the most valuable car company in the world. Whether you agree with that or not, as in, are they actually a great car company? That's up to you. But the thing that is absolutely shocking here is the amount of ad spend per vehicle sold for Tesla. It is 0. Tesla does not spend money on marketing. Imagine you are in that sales team. Imagine your CEO says to you, you know what, the constraint for your team is no money. You get no money. You have to promote my company with no money. And Elon Musk is very famous for doing this. He practices what's called first principle thinking, that if you are struggling with the constraint of something, break it down into its very more fundamental startup thinking than that. If you don't like the way something is, break it down into its most fundamental parts and see how you can adapt from there. Imagine if Jaguar had to say, you know what, you don't get the $1,500 next year. You have to do marketing a different way. Their business would go under. They don't know how to operate that way. And people often criticize Elon Musk for this, but this is why he and his business are so interesting, because there are constraints everywhere that push them into very unique and interesting ways of doing things. So what I want to leave you with on that section is constraints cause creativity. As much as your big business might want to throw budget at something, budget doesn't lead to innovative and interesting thinking. Giving more and adding more, giving bigger budgets and more people won't help you solve a problem. Oftentimes, startups understand that you have to shrink things down to solve problems. You have to do something small to solve something big. Constraints cause creativity. Now I want to tell you about one of my favorite recent company discoveries. This is a company called Prometheus Fuel. And I'm going to show you the images and you'll understand them in a second. But Prometheus Fuels is run by a guy called Rob McGinnis. Rob's task, and bear with me here, this is hard to really grasp when I first heard it. He is solving a $1 trillion problem. Now, the $1 trillion problem, I asked his investor, who's a friend of mine, what on earth is a $1 trillion problem? There are barely any $1 trillion companies. And Rob said, well, if the entire world is your addressable market, then you have a $1 trillion problem. And what Prometheus Fuel does is it extracts CO2 emissions from the atmosphere, pushes them through nanotubes that they invented, and creates fuel that can be used in our existing vehicles, in our planes, in our cars, in our trains. Think about that for a second. They know how to, one, solve the greenhouse gas emission problem, and two, turn it into fuel that our existing cars can use. So I said to Rob, cool, how long did it take you to figure this out? And the phrase that comes into mind here, and the one that I want to leave you with, is strong opinions loosely held. Rob said to me, it took me 6 years in a lab on my own, holding the strong belief that I could extract CO2 from the atmosphere and turn it into fuel before I figured out how to do that. Rob had a very strong opinion, but he held it very loosely so that he could figure out the best way to implement the solution. He didn't retroactively fit a solution into a problem that he wanted to solve. He held a strong opinion, but he held it very loosely. And I absolutely love the way of thinking. The other thing that I love about Rob is that not only is he a scientist at that caliber, but he also majored in theater. So Rob has the ability to solve a big problem and tell an incredible story that allows him to raise the money and hire the team to build the thing that he's trying to do. And the smashing together of those unexpected skills just blew me away. The fact that he's a scientist who is a theater major, what an incredible way to go. So strong opinions loosely held. That is something that I believe startups excel at. If the facts change, they change their opinion. They don't hold on to a solution just because they have to. Now I want to take you back to me working at Vodacom. I spent a very interesting 2 years or year and a half working at Vodacom, building internet products for them. And one of the internet products that I built for them was this game. This is an actual game that was built on feature phones. If you guys remember feature phones, they're those with the little buttons on. They didn't have touch screens. This game was called Legends of Echo, and bear with me here. It was a massively multiplayer, online, location-based mobile game. In short, the middle screen, you can see McGinty's Bouncer. That's a character, and one of the buildings on the left is Santon City. That guy was standing in Santon City. He opened up the game and he could play against other people standing in Santon City. And then they could shoot at each other and we would make money every time they fired their guns. Not a great business model for the consumer, fantastic for Vodacom, but let's park that for a second. The interesting part of this story is we didn't build the first version of the game for a phone that our customers were using. Because this was a corporate, we built the first version of this game for a phone that our boss was using. Now, the key takeaway here is we think that we understand our customers, but is bureaucracy preventing you from actually understanding your customer? Are you building for your boss? Are you building for your manager? Are you building for your colleagues? Do you have any idea what your actual customer is doing, knowing, using, wanting, or thinking? We knew, but our boss prevented us from doing that thing, because he wanted to test it out first. He wanted to show his boss's boss that he was the one building a game. So we blew half our budget building a phone. And I mean, you guys remember the BlackBerry. We built the game for BlackBerry. And our end consumer did not use BlackBerry. At that point, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, only the certain kind of person in a certain kind of office was using BlackBerry. Our users were on phones that supported Java, J2ME. So that was a bust. We didn't make it. We blew our budget and we moved on. The key thing here is know your customer. I want to talk to you about 3 brands that I believe know their customers better than anything I've ever experienced. Safair is a savior to me in my existence. I travel a lot, and it's part of my rider when I go speaking or do work anywhere in the country that I only fly on Safair. It's a really fundamental thing. I want to compare Safair to your favorite bank. Pick one. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Safair understands their customers so intimately that they got rid of everything that we didn't want. My seat doesn't recline, and I love that. They arrive on time and they depart on time every time, and I love that. It's literally the only thing you want from an airline is arrive on time, don't let me recline my seat so that someone can piss me off, and then land on time. It's really that simple, and Safair nails it. Now think about your bank. How many times have they tried to sell you a cell phone? Have they tried to sell you an iPad? Have they tried to upsell you on something that you just don't need? And all the time, your bank fees are too high, or your transfers don't come through enough, or their support is terrible. They fundamentally don't give customers what they want because they want to make more money. Then I want to talk to you about Zappos. If you don't know Zappos, they're a shoe company that Amazon bought many years ago. They were founded by a guy called Tony Hsieh, and Zappos is famous for coining the phrase, "We are a customer service company that happens to sell shoes." And I believe that that should be a phrase that everyone adopts. We are a airline. We're a customer service company that happens to fly people to places. We're a customer service company that happens to sell iPads. Great. Everybody should be a customer service company first. And fundamentally, that is what saved Safair from everyone else. Is as a startup, they understood the number one thing they needed to do was listen to their customer and execute on their complaints. And that's what they did. And then I want to take you to my favorite example, which is Dbrand. Dbrand is unlikely you've ever heard of them. They are a cell phone case company. That is literally what they do. They make cell phone cases with interesting things on the back. Their customer service is absolutely one of my favorite in the world. This is a tweet that they replied to, and the user says, "One of these days I'll stop giving my money to Dbrand." And Dbrand responded on Twitter and said, "Only after we bled you dry." Now, I absolutely love this because Dbrand fundamentally understands what their customer wants from them. They teed up their business so that their customers know that they are sarcastic and snarky, that they have these intelligent quips, that they are always going to give you shit. They're not the kind of company who's going to apologize because you got the wrong thing. What they're going to do is swear at you for making the wrong problem for them. And that's what people love. They have over 2 million followers on Twitter, I think could be 1 million, but their customers know them and they know their customers. And that's the key takeaway here. Startups understand their customer and their customer understands them. Your goal is to know your customer so that your customer will want to know you. And if you don't take the time to get to know your customer, there is nothing you put out into the world that they will want to buy from you. It's just a fundamental and universal truth that every startup understands. You have to understand your core customer. So on the left, we have a board game called Dungeons and Dragons. And on the right, we have a game called FIFA. And the tie between these two is absolutely one of my favorite stories of recent memory. I had the luxury and privilege of getting to know the founder of Electronic Arts. His name is Trip Hawkins. I interviewed him on my podcast, and he told me the absolutely astounding story of how he came up with the idea for Electronic Arts when he was 11 or 12 years old, back in the 70s. I think it was the 70s, could have been a little bit earlier. And how he patiently and obsessively waited for the technology to catch up to him so that he could build this business. So at the age of 11 or 12, he was sitting and playing Dungeons and Dragons with his friends, and TV had just become a thing. So in the basement, there was a TV for them to watch, and one by one, hour after hour, his friends would get up and go and sit in front of the TV and have a blank stare on their face while they just stared ahead at the TV screen or whatever was showing. And he said to me, I was so shocked and I couldn't understand all watching this blank screen, bored and dead in their eyes. And he said, there and then I understood that I had to take this game and put it on TV. And he understood fundamentally that this just wasn't possible at the time. So he waited. At the age of 12 or 13, he built a business plan and he understood what he needed to do. And I mean that. He actually built a business plan at the age of 12 that he executed step by step from the age of 13 all the way to the age of 26. When he eventually left Apple and Steve Jobs, he worked closely with them and built Electronic Arts when technology had caught up. And the thing here that this illustrates to me, and Trip is one of a slew of founders who are this way, is that obsession opens opportunity. You have got to obsess over a problem that is presented to you, and you have to obsess over the solution. It doesn't help you to have a solution that you're trying to retrofit into a problem. It's just not the way that works. Most startup founders are trying to fix something or plug a gap or plug a hole that they just cannot let go of. And for Trip, this was it. I've yet to meet a founder of a startup who flippantly said, like, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. Uber was the same thing. Uber's founding story is really interesting to me, just one that I remembered. On New Year's Eve, Travis Kalanick wanted to get a limo and he just couldn't. So he said, wouldn't it be cool if I could just open my phone, push a button, and the limo would arrive? And that's where the obsession started. And then he just obsessively tried to build this business. Obsession opens opportunity. The thing that we're really talking about here, and the big part of all of this, is what is called a learning organization. And fundamentally, this is what a startup is. A startup is filled with people who are obsessively learning all the time, and they're surrounded by an organization that allows them to learn. There's a guy called Peter Senge who developed the concept of a learning organization. And look, a learning organization is what it says on the tin. It's an organization set up to help the people inside of it learn about new technologies, new skills, so they stay agile and in front of the things that are coming at them. Most organizations are not built this way. Peter Senge bases this idea off the concept of systems thinking, that everything we do is a system. Your relationship with your dog is a system. The way you sit on your chair is a system. Going to the shops is a system. And every system is made up of parts. And if one of those parts breaks down, the entire system breaks down. And one of the integral parts of a startup is the ability to learn and stay curious. And this final one, the curiosity side of startups, is unequivocally my favorite and the most important to me. Startups are filled with people who constantly ask, why? Why is this that way? Why can't I do that? Why should that person get this? Why is that company dominating this industry? They're constantly allowing their team to ask why and figure out the solutions. They're constantly teaching each other. They're building their organization around the idea of teaching. One of the founders that I spoke to in this regard is a guy called Hussein, and he runs a company called Onfido. Onfido does KYC. Whenever you sign up for a bank account and you have to send your passport or ID photo, his company is the one that's checking it for you. They're a £100 million business. They're structured from the ground up to be a learning organization. What they do when they hire you is ask you what you do outside of work. What are you interested in besides the work that you do? And every single week, they have one of their senior team teach one of the junior teams something new, something they're interested in. And then vice versa. They get the junior teams who specialize in something to teach a different team something that they know that they didn't know before. And this is how they institutionalize the concept of a learning organization. And the difficult thing that big business struggles with is that teaching people to be curious and learn is often disruptive. It's often a way for them to look outside of the current revenue models, and that prevents them from gaining quarter-on-quarter results. Sadly, Q-on-Q results are the thing that prevents businesses from surviving beyond the next quarter, because if you're looking for results all the time and you're forgetting about curiosity, you're going to eventually run out of things to think about. Curiosity is not the most direct path to profitability, but it is unequivocally the one that sets startups apart. So much so that I've developed a flywheel of curiosity that I call the Curiosity Catalyst. And this is 5 really simple steps to promote curiosity in your business. I say that they're simple, but fundamentally and institutionally, they can be quite hard if you start at number 1 and you don't have the best people. You don't have the best people in your business, the chances are they're not going to be curious and they're not going to obsess over anything. So here's how it works. You need to hire the best people. and let them obsess over the problem that you presented to them or find one of their own. Then you need to give them the space to experiment and let them embrace failure without the fear of any recourse. If you are worried that your staff is going to fail and then you have to fire them, there is no chance they're going to learn and push the boundaries. And then the final one that is super key for startups is they have to think long term. Very few startups that are trying to change the world think short term. I want to go through that again because it's really important to structure a business around these things if you want a learning organization. You need to hire the best people, give them a problem to obsess over, let them experiment, embrace failure without the fear of firing, and then let them think long term. And that long term one alludes to what I was talking about, the Q1, Q2, Q3 results. If you forget about short term results and you aim for the long term blue ocean, it's very likely that you're going to find an innovative problem to solve with the solution you have internally. So curiosity for me creates change. This is the big thing. This is the one that we're all looking for. This is, for me, the essence of every startup, is they're curious about everything, and that leads to change. So now I wanted to take you back to the Blockbuster boardroom, and hopefully it's not your boardroom. Hopefully you're not the person standing in front of a burning building telling everybody not to worry, to move along because there's nothing to see here. I want you to not panic, because fundamentally this world we're living in was always going to be the world we were going to get. We were always going to have new technology. It's how we adapt to that technology that defines what we're going to be doing for the next 10 years. And then I want you to remember the 5 or 6 key things that I taught today. Shift your perspective, and your perspective will shift your business. See a recession and a depression as an opportunity, not a period of panic. Constraints cause creativity. You don't need to throw money at the problem. Startups do not have money to throw at problems. Startups scale with growth capital, but in the beginning, their constraints create their creativity. One of my favorite, it's one of my nickisms, if I'm honest, it's one of the things I live by, is strong opinions loosely held. It's okay to change your opinion. It's okay to do something different if the facts have changed. If last year you were never going to use video conferencing to make a sale and you're sticking to that in 2020 in the midst of a global pandemic, then you've got a problem. Strong opinions loosely held. Know your customer, and your customer will know you. If you go to great pains to understand exactly what your customer wants, who they are, and how you can help them, the chances are they're going to want to get to know you. And the case in point is, I just gave Fly Sapphire tons of free advertising because they understand what I need, and I'm now trying to convert more customers to them. Know your customer, and your customer will know you. Obsession opens opportunity. If you find a problem and you obsess over it, you give your team the ability to obsess over it, put constraints on them to find a solution that works, you will find opportunity. And finally, curiosity creates change. It is not your job to stifle the curiosity of your team and focus them on a business model that might not be around in your year. It's your job to find the best people and give them a problem to obsess over. Let them experiment, let them fail, and think long term so that your business knows what's coming at it in the next 5, 10, however many years. And then in closing, I really want you to remember that pressure is a privilege. And the fact that you have a business to worry about and over puts you in a position of privilege. And that pressure is something that needs to be used, to quote Diane, to turn coal into diamond. Thank you so much for your time today. This is where you can find me, my website, and you can follow me on LinkedIn, where I do most of my content. And I'm very happy to open up to questions and conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. That was amazing. And I think that 3 things for me were really, really super awesome to hear is strong opinions held loosely. That's quite an interesting one, because if everybody's on social media at the moment, everybody has an opinion of something. So, and it's interesting to watch how people change. So strong opinions is important, and understanding your customer. Everybody gets it wrong, I think, at some point. And opportunities, there's always something different, and there's always something happening that we can jump onto. So those were huge takeaways for me, and I hope everybody else got as many takeaways. So let's start the conversation and tap into Nick. He's only here for half an hour longer, so use his expertise while he's here. We have some comments on the side. Awesome.
Ingrid's first question is the first question I always get. I'm so hesitant to give away my secrets.
I know, right?
It's a brilliant tool called Prezi Video. It's really phenomenal,
awesome.
and it goes through Zoom. It takes some getting used to, but it genuinely is amazing. And as you can see, I don't have to share my screen, and yeah. Happy to help. Ingrid, come up with another question, please. Something more relevant.
Maybe one comment from my side. I was actually riding on my motorbike into work this morning, and the great thing about riding motorbikes is that you can't answer phones, you can't text anybody. So it gives me a half an hour in the morning and a half an hour in the afternoons that I get to just clear my brain. And as I was riding in this morning, the thing that I thought about was that I actually function really well, when things are going crazy, when things are, as you said, under pressure. And I think, I guess we're a group of people that typically listen to this or find ourselves in this category that, perform under pressure, and being, taking that mind shift in seeing that pressure as a privilege was almost sort of the end of my conclusion this morning. So, I'm happy to see that other people are also, finding this, it's useful. So.
Yeah, it really did shift the way that I thought about pressure. I mean, a little bit of too much information about me. I see a psychologist, and one of the early sessions, he told me how addicted to anxiety I was, and what your body physically does when you feel anxious is you get a hit of dopamine and you focus better. It's a very fight or flight mechanism that allows you to work at a higher level. And for ages, I've tried to understand what this is. And in the startup world, you put yourself in that position so you can work at a level that no one else can. So there is this fine balance of managing the pressure and trying to make sure you're not anxious about it. So yeah, I get it.
100%. Nice. Thanks, Gabriel. There is a question, Nick. How do you deal with management that does not tolerate failure?
I leave the company. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm being flippant, but that is what I did. I left Vodacom and never went back to another corporate, and have built businesses on my own since then. But the truth is, it's hard because institutionalized thinking is exactly that for that reason. And Diane and I are in a course with a guy called Rich Mulholland, and Rich wrote a book called Legicide, and Legicide is fundamentally a truth about big businesses. They don't want to change because it's always worked. Why would they not do it going forward? Because it will work. So it is a very difficult thing. I think that the way that Onfido does it, I mentioned Onfido earlier on, they've got a very smart tiered system on how they embrace experiments. So you, as let's say a bottom level employee, can go to your line manager and ask for a very small budget to prove an experiment that you want to try. And if that works and they like it, you can go to his line manager or her line manager, and you can then justify for more budget until it gets to the CEO. And then it's a fundamental company shift because you've had multiple experiments at differing levels of tests that cost the company more and more money, but prove bigger and bigger things. So that's how I would approach it. That's in terms of experiments. However, the difficult thing is a lot of people just don't agree with the idea of failure. I've literally written a book about my first 10 years of failure. And one of the things that I try and help people understand is that failure is not an end point, it's a through point. It's something that you get through to learn lessons and implement again. But if your organization just doesn't understand that, it's very hard to get them to change their DNA.
Absolutely. There's another question. How do you manage balance working on now and working on future or vision?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that they have to go hand in hand. And as a startup founder, it's always the difficult thing. And I mean, I'll add a third into that. The first thing is it's hard to work on what's currently important. The second is it's hard to work on what's going to be important. And the third is it's hard to work on your business and not in your business. And I think that those, as a startup founder, it's a very difficult thing. So to be honest, I don't actually have an answer to that. But what I can tell you is you can't really top up someone else's cup unless yours is full. So as a startup, your number one goal is to survive. And Paul Graham is one of my favorite investors, and he's got an essay. I think if you go to paulgraham.com/die, he talks about your number one goal is to out-survive everyone else. If you can do that, the chances are you're going to win. That's what you need to do. So once you've done that and you've got enough runway for 5 years, cool, start thinking about what comes next. But startups mostly have 3 to 6 months of runway, and there's no chance you can think about what's coming in 3 years if you can't pay bills in 3 months.
I think a lot of people are in that situation at the moment. COVID has taken their feet right from underneath them, but it's time now to have that mindset shift change, as you were talking about. Chris has a question. Your opinion around having an ideal product for the niche versus a more general market?
Really hate to quote Paul Graham again, but his fund Y Combinator built Airbnb, and Airbnb was struggling to gain traction in America. And he said to them, "Well, where's your number one market?" And they said, "New York." He said, "Cool, go fly to New York, go see what's happening there." And what came out of that was a phrase that I use and quote almost daily: to build something big, you have to build something small. And that's what I believe, is you absolutely should start in a niche, and niches grow. Either you grow them because what you do is so cool and impressive and amazing, or your customers grow that niche for you, or over time, the thing that you're building becomes more in demand. It's very hard to boil the ocean with a magnifying glass. And so my goal is always to start niche, and usually I solve problems that I have. And as it goes, other people will have that problem too.
Great. How do you deal with client apathy or indecisiveness when one is rearing to go and can see what they need?
You move on to the next client. Maybes or no's. Maybes are fundamentally no's. If you are hunting maybes, then you're in trouble. I learned this lesson in spades. One of my clients earlier on business, we signed a two-year, 2 million rand deal, and they were about to re-sign, and they said, maybe. We had to retrench half our staff because they said no. Maybes fundamentally are no's. If your company that you're pitching isn't keen off the bat and signing your deals, then move on. We, as startups, fundamentally what we have is a sales problem. Most of us have got good products, and most of us think that 1 phone call or 2 phone calls a day is what we call selling. It's not. It is a statistical game. If you make 50 phone calls a day and 10% convert, you're going to make 5 leads a day. If you only make 3 phone calls, 10% of that is 0.3. That's not a lead. So I'd say that move on from those customers, maybes or no's, get away from them and find the customer that works for you. The more viciously you say no to people, the more you're going to find your kind of company anyways.
It's also about understanding your client possibly too. So maybe the client is not the right one.
And it is a difficult thing early on. Sorry, it's a difficult thing early on when you're a startup or when you're a small business trying to regain your footing, is you want any customer. And actually, I think that reaction is wrong. You want the right customer, not any customer, because any customer is going to give you any problem. The right customer will give you the right problem to solve. So that's kind of how I see it.
The biggest lesson from your many failures, Helena wants to know.
Oh, that's a tough one.
You shouldn't say failures. There should be opportunities that you've done.
Well, you know what? Some of them are flat out failures. Like, for example, my very first business that I raised money for, I was 20. I raised 250,000 rand from a private investor, and 4 days later, I gave the money back. That was an absolute failure. I had no idea what to do with that money. And I thought, instead of spending it and ruining this relationship, let me just give the guy his money back. And he was so happy. He was like, cool, no problem. Like, that's great. Let's move on. So I'd say that there definitely are failures. And I think the thing that I've learned the most from failure is that it doesn't kill you. Like, it's fun. The only time you should be scared of failure is if you will literally die. If the thing you're about to try will kill you, maybe reconsider it. If it's not going to kill you or your business, go for it. Because what you're going to get out of it is a lesson. And that lesson, if you're smart and you're robust, you're going to implement it into the next iteration of your product. And then you're going to build a system that does this. That, I tried something, I failed, I learned something, I implemented it. I actually put on LinkedIn yesterday, the most successful businesses I know are the ones that fail most often, because they're not scared of failure. And getting over that is the thing that we have to deal with. I mentor a lot of people building side hustles and startups, and the number one concern I get is, oh my God, what if I fail? My answer to them is, what if you don't try? What happens then?
Yeah, absolutely. Hiring the best people can be expensive. How do we hire the best people with a startup budget?
Give them equity. That's it. That's it. You sell a vision and you give them equity. There is no way around that. It's what I've done from the age of 18, and it's what I do today. If you genuinely believe these people are the best and you need them to make what you're making, then you got to get them in at any cost. I've even gone so far as to give them portions of my salary, to give them profit share, to do whatever I can to get them in. The only problem with that is if you make a mistake and you mishire, now you've got someone who's heavily embedded in your business. So your hiring practices need to be spot on. At a startup, without doubt, early on, the number one thing is getting the best people in your business. I've even refined that over the last 5 or 10 years as to what kinds of people I like to hire. For the first 5 years of a startup, I hire expert generalists. I don't know if you guys have come across the T-shaped person, a jack of all trades and a master of one. Like one thing that they excel at. You want someone who can do a lot of things for the amount that you're paying them and the equity you're giving them. If you have 10% of your business and you can't do anything outside of that, you've got a problem. So I always look for expert generalists and then I give them equity. Obviously that equity is tiered and it vests over 3 to 5 years and there are cliffs on when I can claw it back. But absolutely, you have to give people equity and pay.
I think that that's quite a big discussion to have if giving equity, because most business owners are very, they'd like to hang on to what they got, and owning a business becomes almost their baby as they build it. So giving equity away is a big decision to get to at some point. But maybe easier in today's society because we can open businesses quite quickly and quite easily.
Yeah, I mean, look, I hate this phrase, and I've used it sparingly, but it's a decision you have to make. Do you want a big part of a small pie or a small part of a big pie? The difficulty and the reason I hate this saying is it tricks a lot of startup founders into giving away too much equity to founders, to investors, to staff too quickly. And then you're left with a small part of a small pie, no salary, and you're struggling through it. So there is a very fine balance that you have to maintain, and you have to work that out for yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you are going to be giving away equity, make sure it's worth. So if somebody's buying equity or you're getting investment, make sure that it's really is what you really, really need. Any other questions? It's quite an interesting conversation that's going on right now, but let's put it out there. Any other questions that you have specific to your business? How do you know if your business idea is an opportunity for growth?
Sure. That is probably the question that I have battled with over the last 10 years more than any other. I think that historically I've been really shit at choosing ideas to grow and scale. And that's something I've worked quite aggressively on myself. So I think that there are some obvious things that we all know: addressable market, scalability of your team, market that you're targeting. I mean, for example, for very long, I ran a sock company in South Africa. I spent 7 years, 18 hours a day, 7 days a week building this business to 5 retail outlets, shipping to 20 countries, blah, 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 blah. But the fundamental truth was we built it in South Africa and it couldn't scale out of that country. So I could have saved myself 5 years of pain doing this in another country. And these are hard truths, but South Africa has a very small e-commerce market. Less than, I don't know, 7% or 9% of our country is buying anything online. It's ridiculous. So if you're trying to scale your company to be $1 billion business online in South Africa, you're dreaming. Name me one. Find me a $1 billion business built out of South Africa that is still here. Naspers doesn't count. That was under the apartheid regime, so they don't count. So I just think that these are the things you have to ask yourself: is what does scale mean for you? So I call these my success and failure triggers. What is success to you? What is the trigger at which you know you have succeeded? And then on the converse, what is failure to you? When you've hit this, you know you've failed. And then you can stop and walk away. It's one of the questions I get the most is, Nick, how do I know I should leave my business? well, you should have failure triggers in place. So my idea of success and growth and scale might be different to yours. What happens if yours is only R1 million a year and mine is 50 million? Then we're both talking about scale, but at different levels. So it's really important to understand what scale and success means to you before you drive yourself crazy. The main reason that I actually tell founders to do that is if your idea of success is very attainable, the chances are you're not going to stress yourself out by trying to get there. But if you're a South African entrepreneur and you're trying to build a $1 billion business, you are going to have stress until you die because it is very hard to do. So you have to understand what your idea of that means.
The percentage that you gave is quite interesting for online businesses or e-commerce businesses, because it will have gone up slightly now, obviously during lockdown. And if people aren't on the online space, they're also going to start losing out. There's quite a fine
opportunity.
There.
Yeah. 100%. It's a great observation. I mean, out of interest in America, and I'm sure that number's shot up too, but for the last 5 or 6 years, Amazon and e-commerce has only been about 15% of their total retail spend. Think about how big Amazon is going to get in the next 10 years if right now it's only 14% of retail spend, or 15. Even if it's 20 or 30, they've still got another 60, 70% to grow. And for South Africa, it's the same, but even smaller. Our problem is we've got 30, 40, 50 years before we get to market penetration of 30 or 40%.
Yeah, absolutely. I've lost the questions. Nick,
I think Lucila was asking something. I saw her with her hand up. You're on mute though.
You're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Sorry,
there you go.
Really focusing so much. I'm Lucilla from the South African Fashion Week, and I would very much like to agree with you. And I see e-commerce for the designers as an extra income, because it's completely overrated. People don't really buy, and I've noticed it. I opened the very first fashion online store called Runway Online in South Africa, and we just broke even. So yes, it is a problem in South Africa, because the perception is we've got to go online, and we forget about our day-to-day business that's sitting on our doorstep and that we really need to cash in on and can actually make a huge amount of money. I'd like to just pose another question to you. How do you find a partner in an environment where perception plays a huge role, and somebody wants to be part of what you have because the perception is there that it's glamorous and it's amazing and it can create this incredible profile for you. Meantime, back at the ranch, it is the most difficult thing in the world. How do you find that person? Because it's impossible.
It is impossible. It's really hard. Finding a co-founder or a partner in your business is extremely difficult. And I've never met a startup founder who doesn't have a stab me in the back story. I have one myself. I had a business that my co-founder sold behind my back without me knowing, and presented the deal to me and said, "Hey, this is what's happening. Either you take the deal or I quit." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. Sweet." So I get it. So I have a rule about people in general, and it's one of my other 10 Nickisms is trust people until they give you a reason not to, and then you get one shot. So if you screw that up, I'm out. But in terms of finding a founder for your company, the thing that I've tended towards is to be brutally honest about everything that I do. So in fact, this is a Rich story. I was sitting with a friend of mine, Rich, and it was a time when my startup was going through a lot of trouble. I hadn't paid myself a salary in 6 months. I'd had to retrench a couple of staff. We'd lost our big client. And Rich said to me at lunch, "Hey, how are you?" And I was like, "I'm amazing. Everything's brilliant. The company's pumping." And I looked at him and I was like, "Dude, that was a lie. I just completely lied. I'm fucked. Everything is screwed. I can't pay salaries. This is not going to work." And immediately he was like, "Oh, dude, me too. I'm having such a rough week." And there and then, 9 years ago, I decided that the best way to find people like you is to be honest. So when people ask me if I'm having a good day, I tell them. And if I'm having a bad day, I tell them. And if they don't like it, they walk away and they're like, "Oh, I'm not asking him again." And if they do like it, then they're like, "Oh, cool. Why is it hard? Like, what are you going through?" And that's the kind of way that I found my tribe. is just by being more honest, more publicly about the things that I go through. And a lot of the talks that I do are just telling people how brutal it is. Things that people don't understand. I used to have a full head of hair in a ponytail until I started companies. I lost my hair from stress and anxiety. I've had kidney stones 3 times. I've had a stomach ulcer that hospitalized me. I've had insomnia. It's insane how difficult this is. And if you think it's all glamour, the chances are you do want to work with me. If I tell you that story, you're going to be like, oh, maybe I don't want to work that hard. So I tend to be more honest to find my kind of people.
Awesome. There's 2 more questions. Nick, you speak about building a better mindset. How do you change from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, which is actually links back straight to what Lucilla was talking about, finding partners too, probably.
I'm going to quickly answer Pam's question. Yes, I'm having a very good day. Thank you for asking. So this is actually something I deal with a lot. And I think as South Africans, we also do struggle with this. And my first experience of this was really when I was raising funding for one of my companies, and I was doing an investment tour. And in the UK, I was sitting at a pitch competition. I had 5 minutes and a big watch or clock in front of me that counts you down to pitch your business. And I spent my 5 minutes talking very humbly about what we did. And at the end of it, one of the investors put their hands up and said to me, Nick, are you the best at what you do? And I said, yeah. He said, well, why the hell didn't you tell us that? And that was like deep down, something that's instilled in me is we don't talk that way. We don't talk about growth. We don't talk about expansion. We don't talk about our achievements and accomplishments. And that was a really big shift for me. And I've worked on that for the last 10 years, is going from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And that means for startup founders, things like spend money. You have to spend money on marketing. One of my businesses, I raised millions of rands and I made it last as long as possible. And at the end of that, what I realized was my investors had given me just enough money to fail. And these are the things that we have to deal with. You have to be able to spend money to figure out if it's going to work. You have to be able to grow to figure out if you're not going to grow. So I don't know how to tell you that it's a shift that you can make, but it is a shift you have to make. That you can't save your way to wealth. It doesn't work that way when you come to your business. You have to scale in the right ways, spend in the right ways, hire in the right ways that work for you. There is no cookie cutter model here.
How do you bridge what you mentioned? Startups have a great product or service, but are poor sellers of themselves. Some ideas.
My immediate sales, hire who's good at sales, or give them upside. Tell them that you'll give them 5 for 10% of everything they sell for the next 2 years, and get the sales experts in your business. This is frustrating for me to even say out loud, but it's true. I've started to look overseas for my sales expertise because I don't think that the experts in South Africa, when it comes to funnel marketing, online ads, I don't think they fundamentally understand the world that we're playing in. We're too conservative, we're too humble. So I'm aggressively going out for the best. And when it comes to selling, I have a rule that if I think I'm selling enough, I should probably double what I'm doing. And it's just the way that sales work. You can't make 5 calls or send 5 emails and expect to make 5 sales. You can send 500 and expect to make 5 sales, but it's just a volume game. So startups, I mean, the best form of funding, sales, that's it. That's the best form of funding, is to make sales. And if your product isn't selling, there's something wrong with your product, or there's something wrong with your target audience. Yeah, I wish it was easier than that, but it's not.
Okay, and I think we're getting to the end now. So one question, Chris has got one.
I've got a few more minutes to run over. Okay. I don't mind.
Are you right? So once your startup is semi-stable and you want to push your own marketing, do you push the brand solely or the person behind the brand?
It's a great question. I have done both to varying degrees of success. My sock company was called Nick Harry. My surname is Haralambous. People call me Nick Harry. My website is nickharalambous.com. The fine line between the brand and the person is gone. And I've actually sold that business now. So I have had to sell my name along with it, which sucks. So it depends on the kind of business you're building. That's the short answer. There are businesses that revolve around the person. And in my head, I can think of Gary Vaynerchuk and those types of people. His brand is VaynerMedia. His company is Vaynerchuk. Like, that's what his thing is. he's not building anything else other than his brand into that. Then underneath that, he's got teams that back up the services, but his brand is the thing that drives it. Conversely to that, there are normal businesses that promote normal brands, and then you're at a game where it's product, service, delivery, price, all of those things. So it really is about how hard you want to build your brand and associate it to what you want to do forever. Right now, I'm deferring to the old way that I did it, which is to build my brand. So you'll see my Facebook ads, my Instagram ads, you'll see me everywhere if you're in my kind of way that I'm trying to sell you. And that's not about a brand. I do also have a brand that goes along with it. So the answer is it's very contextual, and it's a decision you have to make for the kind of life you want to live.
And a follow-on question, and quantity volume games at a lower cost versus quality, more specialized products at higher cost. What are you suggesting people should target, or is there no target at the moment?
No, I think there's always a target, and I hate saying it again, but the target is contextual. It's all about what your business is looking for and what kinds of leads you want to get. So if you want to spend R2 on a lead, sure, you can get 2 million leads. If you want to make sales from those leads, that's a whole different game. So I find that there's a lot of experimentation that has to happen here. And I mean, I'm doing it again with my team at the moment. We've gone from acquiring a lead at R1 or R2 on Facebook and getting hundreds and hundreds of those into our lead funnels and making no sales, to going to LinkedIn and spending 80, 90 Rand a lead and making 1 or 2 sales, but running out of volume. So there is a very fine balance on this, and it is about what you're selling, what your margins are, what your marketing team is capable of doing, because oftentimes they don't know where to find you high quality leads. And that combination of things can be quite overwhelming. I would say that the first port of call is to just get some leads in your funnel. Just figure out, if you spend R2, do you make any sales? And then if you spend R4, do you make any sales? And you'll find your sweet spot over time. But if you're worried about this in terms of you need that money in quickly, you're going to rush and not figure out what those answers are anyways. So you need to have some time and money to play with. And that goes back to us talking about abundance. You have to be willing to spend 10,000 Rand on ads, not worry that it's wasted, and learn the lesson so you can spend the next 10,000 Rand and make back 8. And eventually when you spend 10, you'll make 12. Then you've got a business.
Absolutely. And you spoke about LinkedIn now. Is that the area that most businesses should be playing in?
It depends on what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to grow your personal brand and you're trying to target corporate people, then absolutely LinkedIn is the way to go. The organic reach is phenomenal. You can start today and get yourself to 20,000 followers in the space of 6 months if you do the right things. Whereas on Facebook, you have to pay to play. If you aren't spending budget on Facebook, even if you've got a group filled with 1 million people, you're not getting anyone to see your stuff. So it really does depend on what you want. The holy grail always is to own your database. So you should be collecting emails that you can then do something with later on, obviously in all the GDPR and correct ways, but email is the holy grail. You need to own your customers' information so that you can get them on a platform that you choose. Getting them on LinkedIn and Facebook just means that at some point you're going to have to pay for them.
I just want to go back to the question. I think Chris asked it. Is it your brand solely yours, or is it the person? If it's the person that's now been highlighted, like you are highlighting your face and your name and whatever everywhere, do you have to like step into another space, like writing a book or becoming a guest speaker, or do you have to go into that public space if it's now your name or you as a person?
Yeah, I think so. This is just my experience. Obviously, this is very about my context, but the going back a few steps. Do you all know about imposter syndrome? You're all aware of it. If you aren't, I'm going to tell you about it anyways. Imposter syndrome is the feeling that in spite of external validation, you don't believe you belong where you are. Okay. That feeling is at the genesis of every single personal branding out Spain. If you want to go into it, that's what you have to overcome. So you have to then be willing to know that you're an expert at something, state that you're an expert at something, tell other people you're an expert at something, spend ads getting people to believe you're an expert at that thing, all the time believing yourself you are an expert, and then getting them to part with their money so that you can teach them this thing. A lot of people don't actually believe they're expert enough at anything to put themselves at the front of this. And with my sock brand, I was very happy to say, this is the best sock, this is the most comfortable sock, and I can guarantee it because I believed it. And then I was happy to be that guy. Right now, I can help you build a better startup. Cool. That's what I'm happy to put my name in front of. And then, yes, write a book, continue writing books, have a podcast, get your face out there. And this is a very hard thing to get over. And Diane and I are dealing with this in the other course that we're doing, is self-promotion is very difficult. And again, I'm going to say, as South Africans, we are humble. We want other people to tell those people that we're the best. I'm done with that. I'm now leaning in. I'm going to tell you I'm the best at something. You don't have to agree with me. You can unfollow me. That's your choice. But if you do agree with me, then spend money and pay me and figure it out. So yeah, I think you do have to position yourself as an expert quite aggressively if you want to be the brand.
Cool. Anybody's got a question before we say goodbye to Nick? Take yourself off mute and ask. That's the easiest, I think,
Yes.
right now. Can hear another
Yeah.
voice now.
Oh. No.
No?
Okay.
Nobody?
It was a
Nobody
pleasure.
anymore. Yeah, I thought that I thought it was a question coming up, Helen, and you actually had to say it then. Thank you so much, Nick, for awesome insight and for joining us here today. I think everybody can see that there's a lot of work to be done behind businesses that we're all creating, but that it's quite enthusiastic to see that it's a lot of hard work. But with a mindset
Thank you all
change.
so much. Please go and follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm going to be cheeky. If you love this talk, you can send me a little testimonial and I will absolutely appreciate it. But thank you so much for your attention and your time. I know that it's scarce these days.
Please go and do recommendations on LinkedIn for Nick as well. And we want to boost the LinkedIn profiles of everybody. So go and write something there, or go and select something there that we can lift up his LinkedIn, so at least we can say thank you in some small way. Thanks a million. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
See you next
Have
month.
a good week.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.